Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm here with my friend Dr. Preston Cherry. He is the founder and president of Concurrent Financial Planning, the head of the financial planning program, and the director of the Charles Schwab Center for Personal Financial Planning at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. He's got over 15 years of financial service and academic experience, where he is focused on empowering individuals to share stories that inform their life design to help them achieve financial freedom and well-being. He is also a new dad. Thank you, Preston, for finding some time to come onto the show today and speak with me about wealth and well-being and what some of our listeners can do if this is something that's been on their mind, that they want to start to feel differently about their money, but maybe they're just not sure how to stop thinking all of these thoughts that they've been thinking their whole life. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Misty. I want to thank my wife, too. She did all the work for 9 months.
Yeah.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
No, it's interesting. So tell us a little bit about your path. I know that you have a very impressive resume as far as, in financial therapy, financial planning, but how did you get into this space, and what's kind of led your career to, the point where you're at with concurrent financial planning and having a book on the way?
Oh, thank you for that. 3 stages. So one stage, I would say that conversations in the home about money are very important, Misty.
Mhm.
And my parents, I have a sister, we're close, Gen X and an older millennial is my sister. We had money conversations in the home, but
Yeah.
I did not know that those money conversations would help me so much with my relationship with money going forward, nor did I think they would lead into a career.
Yes.
So we had those money lessons. Secondly, I had a mentor in undergrad, so 25 years ago now. Oh my goodness. And he was like, I think you'd be good at this personal finance thing. Let me introduce you to some folks. It happened to be Texas Tech, one of the most prestigious financial planning programs in the country. And I got my master's and PhD from there. And then lastly, I would say I went through some trial in my life in early 30s. I mean, I did fairly well in my 20s, and then there's some trial. And then I went to this transformational period. And then it contributed to my understanding about the emotions of money and what that means as far as the humanity of money, and also the dollars and cents with the C and then cents with an S, and put it together. I was the president of Financial Therapy Association for a little bit. So bridging the emotions, the sense and the sense together, I think that catapulted to, and going through that transition and wanting to help people to have that same transition and transformation led me to where I am now.
Wow. And so I think it's really interesting. So this has kind of been the path that you've always been on. It sounds like, even through school, this was an area that you've been focused on. So a lot of times we end up here, maybe not knowing that this is going to be a career for us, or that this is even a career that we can. I remember when I was, starting out after school looking for work, or in the early 2000s, and, financial advice itself wasn't really a thing that you could make money. They're like, okay, you package that with insurance sales, or you have to go work here. And it wasn't something that I was really in love with doing. I liked the investment side, and I loved that talking about money was very normal in our household too, because we had a lot of financial struggles. Same age, my sister in 1979, I was born in 1980. So we always talked about money because we were trying to figure out how to get money to do this thing or that thing or whatever was coming next. So when I talk to people that say, like, we never discussed money ever growing up, I'm like, what was that like? That must have been so relaxing, because I felt like we talked about money every single day. So it's interesting that, I love that there's so much more focus on this as a career path itself, the
For
advice
sure.
side, the sense part of it, because it felt like it was so separated. It was really about returns, about product sales, and talking about a specific pitch, versus like getting to the root of why people do what they do. And usually it's to feel better. whether they spend money, save money, whatever they do with it. So I'm interested to hear about, your perspective, because I think it's really interesting how you kind of think about wealth and well-being. So how do you connect those two? And where do you think most of us are maybe missing the mark in that area?
Well, wealth and well-being. Some folks like to ask Misty. They're like, "Well, what does it feel to be wealthy? What does that mean
Mhm.
to you?" And here lately, there's been some bridging and sinking in all into wealth.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if I have more wealth of time, a wealth of experiences, a wealth of this, a wealth of this, then I have, I have a comprehensive view of wealth, and that's all fine and dandy. That said, there was actually a recent Schwab report actually had asked folks, what is that number to make
Mhm.
you feel wealthy, and it was like $2.2 million. And then they also had said, describe what it means to be wealthy, and it's had all these well-being aspects in it.
Mhm.
That more time, more control, more this or that for it, and it was non-dollar amount. So what do you take from that? Well, I, wealth makes, or money plays such an essential role in our life. Anything that we do in life, whether it be, buying some water, buying some toilet paper, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everything, it's either two ply or one ply, it's either this or it's the quality of life. It's where your aspirational goals
Mhm.
are. Are you going to invest in yourself? Are you going to invest in your children? Are you going to be able to buy time? All right. If
Mhm.
you're a two spouse household, all right, who's going to be contributing more time or not? Or are you going to buy some support services? Buy maybe a nanny. I got a child, right? All of that takes dollars, Misty. And so I think that, and also just preferences as well. I have these 4 P's: plan, purpose, process, and preferences in order to lead to prosperity. And within a plan, it gives folks permission to go after enough until it's enough,
Yeah.
because dollars do fund every aspect of our aspirational well-being, whatever that may be.
Yeah. There's always a financial aspect. And that's why I think it's interesting that a lot of times people think about the dollar amount being separate. And then maybe they're like, okay, well, I have this and now I can fit my life into this, or I can't afford any of these goals. I can't go back, I can't change jobs. I have to and they're kind of backing into it with money leading the way. And so a lot of people I talk to don't seem that happy with that course of action, because it really is, trying to figure out how to do what they can with what's there instead of trying to decide what they want to do, where they want to go, and backfilling it with money. Is that because we've just been conditioned to see people work hard, pay the bills, and not really, I mean, financially currently, I think a lot of people are feeling some stress with inflation, student loan debt, credit card debt, where they really haven't given themselves a lot of permission to do some of those P's that you've mentioned, like planning or, preparing. So, where do you think that people can, if they're feeling overwhelmed, maybe they feel like there's just, this is what it is. Maybe
Right.
they've kind of gotten that point. How do you help them kind of back into really starting to envision, a life that feels maybe a little bit more content, where we figure out how money can work in the meantime?
Right. So, folks always ask me, Misty, they're like, what is all this soft stuff,
Yeah.
all the emotions and the sense with an S have
Mhm.
to do about money? And then they ask, well, when are we going to get to the sense with the C? When are we going to get to the recommendations? How are you going to tell me about this Roth conversion or, 401k contribution? And what does all this soft stuff have to do with the money? Everything.
Yeah.
Because one of the phrases I have is, and when you touched on it fabulously, which is having a dollar amount and backing into it. Well, if we reverse that, and the phrase is, let your life lead your money, not your
Mhm.
money lead your life. And it allows for this financial life planning. It says, okay, what is my aspirational goal? What is it that I want to do? My aspiration, not that goal, just aspirations. How do I want to live now? I mean, I meaning your household. How do I want to live now and in the future? And how do we invest in that, or take steps now in order to fund the aspirational life that we want to live? It's a courageous, bold, authentic, open, vulnerable process that starts with that. Then you can go about saying, okay, now I have some sort of sense of what my enough is, and
Mhm.
I can go out and earn and build well, earn income, build wealth in order to feel, that level of well-being or aspiration that I want.
And is enough? I think that concept is really hard for people. And sometimes I'll even start with just trying to help people figure out how much it costs to be them. And they don't know right now, like what they're spending. They just know like what comes in, what goes out. And they're really not sure what enough might be. So how do you back people into figuring out, okay, what is enough? Is it really just figuring out, you know, the technical things, where they live, how much they spend, what they, what their bills are? Or is there like people will ask me, how much money do I need? And I feel like that is one of the toughest questions because
Yeah.
there is no like $1 million. Everybody needs $1 million because I could see a lot of people spending $1 million taking the rest of their life to spend that much money. And other people could probably cruise through that in, one real estate purchase. And they'd be like, okay, I'm back. We took
Right.
it out. How does that thought of like, figuring out what enough is, like, what is enough for you? And how did you come to that conclusion?
Hmm. Yeah, that's why I always end wealth and well-being, those two words, and even faith for that matter. It is wealth, well-being, faith, how you define it.
Yeah.
Because that's the key, is how you define it. What is your version of your well-being? What does it take? And
Mhm.
it's going to be different for different folks. My parents, they don't have a massive amounts of money during their retirement. They've been retired for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, a little bit of a pension, a little bit of a 401k. But they are they have they're fulfilled with my sister and I being good at what we've done. They've invested in us,
Yeah.
so they appreciate that. That's their fulfillment. And then also how they're living in retirement is, they got paid for a house, paid for cars,
Mhm.
right? They're collecting a little social security, little 401k, and they've allowed me to share their story a little bit, but
Mhm.
and so it doesn't take much
Yeah.
for them, but they feel fulfilled. Now, comparative, like you said, and it's not compared. That's another thing. Please, all these folks,
Yeah.
do not compare yourself to other
Mhm.
folks and other church, because
Yeah.
so much life has happened, right? Because
Mhm.
that's a poison pill right there. But if somebody else were to have that version of well being, they were like, oh man, how do they get by?
Yeah.
You know, oh my gosh, I can't live like that. Well, again, that's how you define it. So that process begins to shape what my journey of enough. And I'll close with this, which is, it's okay to want more.
Mhm.
It's okay to want more. Either advisors or society or even internal says, oh, okay, well, we're placing money on a pedestal. No, that's not the case. You're leading with your life design and seeing about fulfillment and what's going to fulfill you. And then if your journey is to earn more in order to, or build wealth and earn more in order to fund what you define, then earning and making more and building more to get to your version of enough is perfectly okay.
Yeah, I think I see that a lot too with a lot of women where sometimes I tell them it's okay to want something just because you want it. It doesn't have to serve a purpose. It doesn't have to be for everybody else's benefit. Like we can just want things and put it on the list. And I think it's okay. But I like what you're saying about, not necessarily comparing it to somebody else's because you're right. There's um I I'd be perfectly happy with, comfortable cars that run, my kids being able to, study or whatever they're interested in doing. And like that would feel like enough for me, where that might feel kind of like, I don't know, for some people that might be not good enough, kind of like sad, but it's like, hey, we've all kind of been exposed to different, we all have a different financial upbringing. Even me and my husband, even me and my sister think about money differently. And we were in the same exact, home growing up. So it is a very personal topic. And so that's why I think it's important when you're working with a planner to be able to kind of dig into those questions because we're so used to seeing, even with social media too, how everyone else is doing and thinking like, I guess I should want to own a business so I could write off my G-Wagon and all these things. And you're just like, should I be there? Should I be thinking about this? And it's like, why is that even coming up in this conversation? And people would just be like, well, I kind of saw this, and should I be thinking about this? And we're kind of getting influenced in a lot of different ways. Where I think it's very unique to have somebody really just focus on what wealth and well-being means to you without anybody else's influence. Are you seeing that more too with people who are like, so should I be doing this? Am I missing out on everything?
Oh, yeah, there you go. I was about to hit that. So great
Yeah.
transition there. Don't get FOMO'd,
Yeah.
right? It's fear of missing out. It's I have this saying called FOMO over FOMO, which is focus on moving on with your plan.
Mm.
Focus on moving on with your plan rather than fear of missing out. Because one of the top recommendations or skills or whatever it may be that I lead off with folks a lot of times when they talk about money is don't compare. Don't compare journeys. And again, they ask Misty, they're like, "What does that have to do with the money?" I asked you for an IRA tip or something like that.
What
Well,
type of returns do I need? What should
yeah,
I be in? Come on, get to it. Yeah.
yeah. I'm telling you, but it starts right there because we're like, oh, internally we say, oh, I don't feel like I'm as far as I should be.
Mm.
Or what about the Jim and Jane down the street?
Mhm.
Or yeah, somebody did more with what I had. Why don't I do that? Well, you have to allow for grace, Misty, which is giving yourself adjustment and to make adjustments for ebbs and flows of life. You can even have this picture of well-being that you want, what you want to invest in, and not have that dollar amount that you envisioned. And then you're going to have to pivot a little bit and say, you know what? Let me give myself some grace. This is what happened to me. These are
Yeah.
my life events, and then this is where we are. And
Mhm.
so let's make adjustments, right? Either along the way or in.
Yeah.
Comparing different journeys, different resources, and all that, that is a recipe for not success.
Yeah, I agree. I caught myself the other day. I drove to I was going on a show and I was driving to a different part of Massachusetts, and it was a town I'd never been to before on the North Shore, and it was gorgeous. These homes were beautiful, lawns immaculate, and I was like, wow. Like I was like, oh wow. And then I was like, for a second, I'm like, wait, I love my town. I love my neighbor. Like all of these things. And you kind of catch yourself slipping into it. But if you don't really have those, if you don't really know yourself and kind of what your, measure of success is, what feels good to you, then it's really easy to see things and be like, oh, wow, I'm not doing well enough, or I'm not, I should make some changes, or everybody is doing better than me. So it was interesting to even catch myself for a second being like, "Oh my goodness, this house is is amazing." But then I'm kinda like, I'm still feel happy going home, so everything is still okay, because then if it was something I continued to think about, then maybe, yeah, maybe we reassess the goals and think about other things, but it's really hard when you do or just in that comparison spiral.
For
It's
sure.
really difficult to get out of it. You mentioned, FOMO. There's another term that I think you've talked about before that I find, that I catch people talking about now, with a lot of people who are gonna be in maybe multiple weddings or bridesmaids or going on all these trips, or, YOLO, where they're
Mhm.
like, "Well, I've gotta do this now, who cares about the future or retirement, or, I'm never going to be able to retire because I have debt." And what do you say to those people who are really having a tough time even thinking about a financially stable future because it's starting to feel harder and harder to reach?
Sure. I mean, YOLO has two different perspectives or two different roads. Well, actually three. I mean, you could have YOLO and say, I'm only gonna live once, so I'm gonna live it to the hilt, and I'm gonna die broke or destitute for that matter. That's somewhat mostly unhealthy.
Yeah.
Then there's two others, which is, uh, you know, if if you don't live enough now, you're gonna contribute to regret later.
Mhm.
So that's another form of YOLO. And also another aspect of you only live once is, well, everybody else has got we have all these events and all, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
whatever. Why shouldn't I be able to do this, or should I be doing these events like weddings and stuff? Well, here's the thing: boundaries, boundaries, and having confidence in what your plan is, and how do you go about doing that. I always share with people on the first part of the YOLO, which is have a script.
Mm.
Have a script to say, because they have this thing called loud budgeting now.
Oh,
There's all
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
This is all stuff. It's like, I think it's kind of ridiculous of all these terms are coming up. But yeah, it's called boundaries, Misty, and it's
Mhm.
have a script to say, Jill and Mike, I thank you for the invitation. But we're not going to be able to make it. I'll send you a gift, but this time we got to sit out. This time we're working on some other things in our family household right now. But thank you so much. We'll see
Mhm.
you we'll see you next time, right? Or something to this effect. Have a script, family members, family boundaries, so on and so forth. I can give a whole bunch of scripts, but the point about it is if you have a script for being better prepared and being confident in where you are going and what you're going to say, then that prepares you to stay on your track and focus on moving on what you're doing rather than fear of missing out.
Yeah. And it's difficult. I think all of us, we we all have that part of our brain that's afraid of being left out, not part of the group, not fitting in. And I think that, there's been a lot of times, especially when when I was in my 20s where I just didn't have money. So I sat out a lot of things because I guess I was loud budgeting a long time ago because I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna be able to go on that trip. But like, I'm really happy for you. And like, I didn't necessarily lose any friends. I missed out on some things, but also like I didn't have the credit to just go, certain things that I think people are now regretting or they're saying like, I don't even want to do this, but I have to. And that's where I think you're right about the boundary issue because it's like, of course you have a choice. You just are afraid of what might happen if you say no.
Hmm.
And it might not be as bad as you think. It's just that kind of that fear that people have about, you know, not experiencing everything or what if I eventually have no friends, which is rarely the case, but I think it's something that I've noticed people have a really tough time setting those boundaries with friends and family. And
Yeah.
it hurts them financially in the long run.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
always say that. Yeah, that's no question about that. I always share that. Self worth and self value are two compoundable assets that nobody can take away from you. And you touched on it a little bit there. It's like, well, but what's going to happen if somebody says no? I mean, what is that? How does that make me feel? How does that make me look? So on and so forth. And money talks in the home. I'll just rewind real quick. Those are the two assets that they didn't even have to deal with money, but
Yeah.
they have everything,
Mhm.
negotiating your salaries,
Yeah.
going into business if you want, asking for a promotion, whatever it may be, far as having that self worth, self confidence, establishing boundaries, and if we've explored being vulnerable of what gives us fear or gives us unrest about our internal selves, all right, and then we can settle that. And that gives us more, worth, worthy. And I'm worthy to be on my journey. I'm
Yeah.
worthy to stay on it. I value my, my finances and my now goals and future goals. So it's okay to
Mhm.
say, you know what, I don't have to go to this one, or I don't have to participate in that one.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was younger, like sitting, like there were some times where I couldn't go on field trips because it cost whatever. And I mean, they weren't expensive, but there were just certain times we couldn't necessarily do it. And I remember like being like at the school and thinking like my life is over. And it wasn't. It
No, it
wasn't.
wasn't.
It was just one of those things where I'm like, maybe I just learned young, like, actually, you know what? Yeah, it'll be fine. But I do remember feeling like that. And I think a lot of people feel that way now with bachelorette parties and travel and just, destination, everything. It's that same feeling that they probably, that I felt in high school when I was like, oh my gosh, nobody's
Yeah.
gonna, no one's ever gonna
It,
talk to me again. And it just wasn't true.
and that's why those money conversations are so important.
Yeah.
Talking events out, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sometimes if you talk about inflation and how money is tight
Mhm.
along whatever economic status you are, it's tighter for some folks than others,
Mhm.
but
Definitely.
people are making choices, and we were sat down, Misty, and people said my parents sat us down and said, you know what, the next 6 months, this is how this is going to look, right? We're gonna rock this hamburger helper, our flavor
Yeah.
of the month, right? And this is just how it's gonna be,
Mhm.
right? And, you get out of school one semester, and then you have the summer. We bought our clothes 3 months ahead of time and put them on layaway. We pay. I grew up middle class. I wasn't poor,
Mhm.
wasn't rich, but we had to, like you said, those money. We talked about
Talked
money.
about it.
And
Yeah.
so when in the future, when these events come up, or these life stage events, not just events like, hey, wedding or whatever, it could be, let's make an adjustment, let's belt tighten, let's
Mhm.
even enjoy ourselves. hey, we got this influx of money. How do we go about putting it into our plan and also doing something fun with it? All of that requires a discussion and how you feel about it and also aligning it with your plan.
Yeah, and I think you've talked before about HSAs and in a different way than what people might be thinking about high yield savings. But tell me about that because what are your thoughts when it comes to having that sort of savings plan and kind of thinking about things a little bit differently as a I think it was a honest self
Self
audit.
audit. Yeah.
Yes. Tell
Yeah.
me
Well,
about that
thanks.
because I think we think about, okay, what are we gonna do? And like really kind of acknowledging certain things as we kind of make plans for bad things that could happen or good. Because I
Right.
think that's also something that's possible too.
Absolutely, because money doesn't have to all be
Doesn't
bad.
have to be bad.
It's not.
Yeah.
You can have triumphant experience and have abundance of money and to do something positive with it. So, yeah. So thank you for introducing that. I always like to say with the regular HSA with the health savings
Mhm.
account, IRS must have lost their mind, Misty, with that one because they
I know,
like collecting tax, you
right?
know, and you get triple tax savings. I'm like,
Mhm.
what was the IRS drinking that day,
Yeah, I don't
right?
know.
Yeah, so take advantage of
We'll
it.
take it.
So, so the EHSA, which is the emotional honest
Mhm.
self audit, and it gives a person a process to do some of the things that we're talking about, which is like this 3A system, which is admit where you are,
Mhm.
acknowledge how you feel about it, so then you can take action. And admitting where am I, wherever that journey is for you,
Mhm.
what do I want? What is my aspiration? Well, what am I not doing? Is there a barrier? Admitting what that is, and then because you've identified it at that point,
Mhm.
then acknowledge how you feel about it. Because what that it gives you a process of working through, unlocking, uh, giving yourself grace, giving yourself permission, and clearing the palate. It's kind of like you was eat something and you're having a tasting party, you swish
Yeah.
it around and you spit it out, right?
Mhm.
You're clearing the palate. So now you're in this healthy state, a more healthy state, to take the action that you want to do what you want to do.
I think that's something that all of us can maybe take a little bit of time to think about instead of just being like moving forward, like even just acknowledging. I think that's such an important step is just like, this is where I am right now. And maybe I can't do everything that I want to do at this moment. Or, and that could be, people who are maybe sitting down to kind of think about a budget or think about some of the goals that they want to reach. And like, I think that's been a lot of people, like you said, they come to us looking for action action, like ready to just, I'm tired of this. I'm ready to do something and move on without necessarily looking back at kind of some of the things that they need to admit.
Right, and even right now in the present, it's
Mhm.
preparing yourself. What is it right now? I like to share with folks. It's like, what is this 3 to 6 months?
Yeah.
Give me a life or money event that you'd like to do differently, and if you had more information, or
Mhm.
if you had more information right now, what would you do differently? So, what is that life or money event that went on the last 3 months, 3 to 6 months that you like? I wanted to do differently. If you had information more
Yeah.
and now you've processed it, what would you do differently and
Mhm.
why? So what that does is it doesn't take folks all the way back to the past. It
Mm.
keeps you right there in the present, right? And then it
Yeah.
allows that process it allows the process to take, and then after that, it's like, oh, now I'm cleared. I've given myself, taking the shame away, taking the
Yeah.
guilt away, taking all that away, and I've processed that. Now I have more energy, and I'm more because I've admitted where I am and I processed it. That it gives that stick to itiveness to the action that we will take, and gives yourself commitment to go ahead and carry it through.
I think that's an interesting thing to think back because some people would just say, "Well, I'm just bad at this. I'm just a bad," and so if you said like, "Okay, what have you done?" and somebody maybe they had a conversation with their boss or something like that that came up that they weren't prepared for. They didn't negotiate or they didn't ask for something that they actually wanted. Like stopping and just going back to that point and being like, okay, how would we do it different? Because these situations will likely come up again. Or the invitation maybe you wish you said no to, or maybe an opportunity that you would have loved to do. It's things like that that come up. I think we always think like, okay, well, I am this all the time. Instead of being like, okay, no, like let's just kind of focus in on something what have we learned since then? What could we potentially do? Because when people start to ask their brains different questions, I find they get better answers than just like, why am I so lousy with money? Okay, well, this reason, remember that time you did this or back in college. And then they'll kind of, but they're not asking themselves, like, okay, if I could go back to this particular conversation, what would I have said? Because then
Mhm.
I think it gets people thinking. And that kind of acknowledgement or just kind of I think it gives people a little bit more confidence, even if they don't make any changes, just to even reflect a
Right.
little bit more, like you said.
Right, giving yourself space and
Mhm.
going on to the next the A's. It's almost six A's. It's admit, acknowledge, and take action. And then now that you're healthier and have a more kindred spirit,
Mm.
then it's aligning your money, aligning with your life and money. Because I always like to say, I was like, if your life and money have alignment, then you can give your money assignments.
Yeah.
And so if it's aligned, now you can say, all right, here's what I want to do. Here's what I don't want to do. I know that. Here's what I do want to do.
Mhm.
It's aligned. And now I can start funding those areas. I can start taking those dollars and investing in building oneself, buying a house, going
Mhm.
on that vacation. And sometimes just buying something because you just want, hey, give me that, that shoe or that purse or
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Right. But the point about it is that now that you have the space to align, all right, then you can aspire to what you want to do and achieve it because now you have some sort of framework to say, you know what, this is what I value. This is what
Mhm.
I value. This is what I value. It makes me feel good. And I also know what doesn't make me feel good. So
Mhm.
now I'm more committed to the plan that I have.
Mhm. Yeah. When it comes to spending, because I think that alignment piece is really, I think it's really important in so many aspects of our lives. But, I think like on reflection of myself, like I'm a person who likes, and so do you, school, courses.
Yeah.
I love it. And I know like when I don't have I had to build in a budget for that, even as a business, just because I knew like that is something where like I'm going to want to do it.
That's right.
I'm interested in it. And so sometimes I'll see people budgeting, zero-based budgeting where every dollar already has an assignment, but there's no room for anything new or different or even you. So how do you think when you think about, kind of figuring out how to get your money in alignment? Like, do you think there's just some things that people should reflect on themselves and how they like to spend, like what feels good and what doesn't? Because I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't feel good paying my loans. I don't feel good paying my credit card or my bills, but something happened where, they
Right.
they spent the
Yeah.
money. So talk a little bit more about alignment and how people can start to maybe understand themselves a little bit better by looking at, maybe how they got to where they are.
Sure. Well, everybody can. Nobody likes paying
No.
bills.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel good to have to go pay a water bill or a mortgage or something like that. But what is the other feeling?
Mm,
The other feeling is, well, what if I'm 2 or 3 months past on my mortgage?
mm,
What does that bring me?
yeah.
What if I'm uh underfunding my future and I have more worry or uncertainty? Uncertain Uncertainty is certain. But
Yeah.
what if I'm stacking uncertainty
Mm,
but not contributing to my future self because it's what I want to do, right? So how does that feel, right? And so now that we've identified that I don't I want to reduce worry. I want to be more confident. I want to have less uncertainty, smooth uncertainty over time. I don't want so much guilt or shame about my finances or my tract of my or the aspect of my life, right? And so that's what I'm talking about feeling.
yeah.
And we know how we don't want to feel. You can't avoid it,
Mhm.
but you can also shift. You can make a shift to where your money situation, because it hasn't been addressed, is leading the direction of your life. And if that doesn't feel very well. Now, if you flip that again, going back to what we said, if your life is leading your money, then you feel your level of well-being. It's not just feeling just some, oh, I'm happy pie in the
Yeah.
sky, right? It is that well-being and all those words that we use. in order to say, I'm living more holistically and I'm funding the way that I want to live. And lastly, I'll say that, you know, in the Maslow's triangle, you have needs, right? Your things you need to take care of, your safety and all that other stuff, your rent and all that. Then you have wants, and and these are they include status, they include confidence, they include aspirational goals about building oneself to actualize yourself. Listen, their wants are needs too. Wants are needs too, and people kind of forget that. And also, advisors and influencers, this and the other. Don't buy this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Well, if you have a plan, if you
Mhm.
have a process, and you have people, different people have preferences, and you have a purpose. That's why those four P's. Then you can live in prosperity the way you define it. It is perfectly okay if you have a plan, a process, and you have purpose, and some material item doesn't make you. But it's perfectly okay to say, you know what, hey, I want to drive a luxury car. Do that if
Yeah.
it fits
Right.
within your
Mhm.
plan.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of where people can maybe acknowledge that. Like, maybe they don't like paying bills, but they don't have a problem making their car payment because it's a car that they love, or they really enjoy,
Yeah.
that it makes their commute better, or they're, all the other things where you could say, okay, but, you know, certain things that really, really hurt, then that might be the first thing that we try to either pay down or get rid of, and get really focused on kind of like, let's alleviate that so we can have that comfort or that alignment. So everything else, yeah, we're gonna have to pay for certain things. Or, if, even with my student loans, when I had some, I felt okay about it at that point because I loved school. I felt
Okay.
like I needed, and so it's interesting to see some people when we start talking about it, they're like, well, actually, yeah, I don't really mind that because, I really do love my car, and they could be honest. I
Yeah.
think when we get talking, instead of being like, well, I know it's embarrassing that I do this, or I shouldn't go get a coffee every day, but it's like the best part of their work day, or it's when they see their friends. And I'm like, I don't care. Let's just
Right,
make
right,
sure we
right.
can do everything else.
You
Tell
know,
me
I
more.
want to say one thing because you
Yeah.
touch on it. And it's fantastic about this goes to alignment. I'll say real quick, which is again how it makes our feel like debt, student loan,
Yeah.
whatever. It's it is about how does that make you feel? That if it brings you anxiety, then you do have alignment, right? If it says, okay, my school loan is bothering me in a way where it's affecting my lifestyle, it's affecting my mental orient, all of this, then it's okay. You have alignment now. So now you're going to allocate those dollars to pay that off. So
Yeah.
you can do the aspirational things that you want. So yes, you can. My whole point about that is you can you meaning the person that's planning their money and use the feeling aspect for what you want to do aspirationally, but also what you want to address
Yes.
immediately.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like, I think that's where, it almost sounds like health, like physical health, where we have the things that we have to address right now, and then maybe we have these goals in the future, and you can have both at the same time. And I think that's kind of something that's been, I think, a bigger part of financial planning is kind of that overall well-being aspect of like, okay, well, we might need to do this right now, but we can still think about a brighter future. We can still think about all those goals that we have, but we might have some work to do still. And
Yeah.
so I think that's where, the 3 A's you talked about, I think are super important. And um, I'd love to hear a little bit now that your family has changed. How do you think you'll start to address money with your family? Now, you have a child that, I talk about money a lot with my kids, and I've noticed that they use their own money. They're 10 and 11, where they use their own money at like some of the little kid arcades, and they realize how fast it goes, and that it's not actually worth it at the
Yeah.
time. And so it's interesting when it comes to spending someone else's money versus your own, and they make decisions a little bit differently. But how about you? What are your thoughts there when it comes to how you want to, how your family's good, because money changes when you've got
Yeah.
a newborn.
Yeah.
How those goals changes, and how are you kind of addressing that in your new situation?
Right. Thank you. So two things. One, to each their own on parenting and how they want to do. Because again, money is personal, life is personal. I always try to suggest that with a child, and I now that I have one, and so I can make the suggestion
Mhm.
a little bit stronger now,
Yeah.
which is try not to uh, over invest emotion into a child
Mhm.
at the at the sacrifice of your own self-care and potentially your spouse.
Mhm.
And why does that matter? Is because I'm sure you've seen this as well when the kids grow up and you got dealing with empty house
Mhm.
syndrome. Or you and then you figure that I've had couples tell me, well, we have to relearn each other, right?
Mhm.
What do we do without our children and stuff? And it starts at the beginning. And so you ask me how
Mhm.
I'm taking that approach. I got that from from my parents, which is they invested in us, oh, tremendously. They put us in better school districts. They gave us what we needed, but they also they gave us self-confidence, self-worth, and we talked about money. We talked about aspirational life.
Mhm.
Those That's generational wealth.
Yeah.
That's generational wealth. In a sense, it's a transference of building up a sense of self, so you can go out and produce out in the world to get what you want. And I'll come back to them in particular. They've been married 46 years now. Uh, they 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 gave people suggestions. It's on one of my podcast episodes to say, listen, we never stopped being friends. You know, we never stopped doing that. So when y'all left out the household, we were like, cool.
Right. We miss them, but
Right.
where we
Right.
go? Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's one aspect. And the second one I'll be real quick, which is those money conversations, they matter. My niece, she's 16 now. She's fantastic with her money. She's like, hey, listen, Uncle Preston, her mom and dad, whomever, she pulls out her debit card, her credit card, and she's like, I gotta watch my finances. She's making her own decisions. And the cash register people at the cash register, they're like, is this a 16-year-old
Yes.
young adult, is doing
Yeah.
all this? Right. And it's because we had those conversations,
Yeah.
early
Mhm.
about money. And I'm going to do the same thing with, with baby Lath. His name is Lath, and my wife and I, as a team, we're going
Mhm.
to have those discussions with him so he's more comfortable with money early.
Yeah, I think it's such a I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of what I've wanted to do because I feel like it's so important. It's almost like, they're gonna they grow really quickly and then they're on their own financially. And I see some people who are just like young adults and they're just completely devastated. They don't know what to do with their money. They feel like, "Oh, I thought I would get a job that would pay me this, and now I have these loans and I'm not like I'm miserable." And it's really impacted. It's so tied to their mental health that I feel like if you can be you know, a young teenager or something and understand like financial decisions, it's not super hard. I think
Right. Right.
we act like it's so much more complicated. Somebody should have taught us this. I hear this all the time. And so I think it's really interesting to just be like, okay, like it's almost like learning how to eat healthy food or something where maybe eventually you just kind of understand it enough to get better and better at it, but it's really kind of a basic life skill that I think a lot of people feel like they're not capable of teaching and depriving, someone of a
Mhm.
childhood where I'm like, oh, money's gonna be part of the deal forever. So
It is, and it's a choice mechanism. They're trade-offs, and it seems basic, it seems fundamental, but some folks are just they don't have access, and it has nothing to
yeah.
do with being income challenged. By the way,
Mhm.
it is it's economic social economic status across the board. If and when I say access, meaning if money wasn't discussed or trade-offs or
Mhm.
choice mechanisms weren't discussed in the household, then no, you don't know. Right. So that's why it's very important to give exposure and
Yeah.
awareness very
Mhm.
early. I'll give you a quick story. My parents they they made my sister and I purchase our toiletries when we got our first jobs, and
Mhm.
even some of our allowance. It started with toothpaste, and then when we got our first jobs, we had to uh, make a choice about priority. And yeah, sure, they could buy our toilet
Mhm.
paper for our
Yeah.
bathroom and our bath and our toothpaste stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure, they could have. And it wasn't a thing like, oh, you're going to do this now. No, no, no. It was a lesson. It was like
Mhm.
when you get paid, you can't do willy nilly with all
Yeah.
with all your money. You have to pay this FICA person because I remember looking at my first check. I was like, who's
Who's
this
this?
FICA dude? You know, you know, and they were like, ah, yes, that's the tax person. And we talked about that, right? Paying yourself,
Mhm.
meaning now and later. But so we put some money into a jar and a ledger, and they used to match it. My introductory to a 401k plan way back, and also, taking care of your priorities before you go, have some fun.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's interesting because then you might be like, okay, well, this is something that I think is worth spending extra on, or this I might go dollar store, toothpaste, I don't care. It's not a priority to me. And you kind of learn about those trade-offs and decisions. But a lot of times people are just like, I expect a certain type of lifestyle that they really can't fund themselves when they are independent. So I think that's funny. I know my kids they'll look on the TV, and if a movie is rent or buy, they'll kind of go, okay, well, what other ones are free? And they'll keep looking, or sometimes it's worth it because they really
Yeah,
have their heart set on it and they'll say, okay, this is one, can we get this? But they'll look where it's not just instant, it's just one
right.
of those interesting things where like we can introduce it in a way that's not terrifying or too
Right.
big, to kids when they're younger. So all right, before we end this, I would love to hear a little bit more about your book that's coming out this year, and of what made you decide to write this book, and really, what do you hope that the audience who reads this book, like, what should that, if anybody's looking to advance their financial literacy or education, tell us about the book and what your hopes are for it.
Sure. So, Wealth and the Key of Life is the title, and it is about some of the things that we've talked about, which is building wealth in alignment with which is the key. It's a song key. It's a reference to a song.
Yeah.
You're using your own music notes to build your own song, and aligning that wealth amount to that well being. And the subtitle is finding your financial harmony. And so, what does that look like? I want to try to challenge, common groupthink thought sometimes about money.
Mhm.
We've talked about a couple of them today, which is wants our needs as well. It's okay to want some status in your social circle or whatever.
Mhm.
That's okay. It's healthy as long as it doesn't define you. All right. So there's we need more context on what's being presented out there sometimes from either from the media or influencers or advisors or even within ourselves.
Mhm.
All right. Like for instance, money is the root of all evil, or money is just a tool. I don't like the word just. Money is a part of our daily existence and any of our future existence. And it's okay to, if your aspiration, like we said here, is to live a life the way you want to live, the life that you want, then
Mhm.
that's giving folks confidence and permission to say, I don't need explanation to folks. If I have those P's together, purpose, plan, preference, right? And a process in order to live prosperous. So I want folks to have a worthiness of abundance the way they define it, and have some of these rules or whatever that may be out of context, and bring them more context, personalize them along the social economic continuum, and start their journey, be in their journey, and accomplish their journey. And also, I give some tips, some a little couple of strategies here and there. But it is about the wholeness
Mhm.
of wealth and well being, putting that together, and giving people permission and saying, yes, this is the life that I want, and this is how I can go do it with the dollars, and start giving my dollars assignment.
I love that. Well, I am looking forward to reading it when it comes out. Can you tell our listeners how to find you if they want to follow you, or learn more about your business, or work with you in the future?
Well, Misty, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate being here. This has been a fun conversation. So, yes, they can find me at concurrentfp.com. That's the wealth management firm. And then Dr. Preston Cherry for all the social media handles. And I do have a podcast on YouTube, Life, Money, Balance.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you everyone for listening. If you'd like to listen to other episodes of the podcast or grab a copy of the book Demystifying Money, head over to my website, mistylynch.com. And I look forward to chatting again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.